The night was supposed to be ordinary. It was late autumn, the kind of evening when the air bites your skin with a quiet chill, and the neighborhood seemed wrapped in silence, as if the world was preparing itself for something unsettling. I had returned home from work later than usual, exhausted, carrying the weight of the day in my shoulders. My small apartment complex sat at the edge of town, surrounded by half-empty lots and patches of trees. The place was nothing special, just cheap rent and thin walls that carried every cough or television laugh track from the neighbors. Yet, it was home, and I was grateful for its predictable quiet. That evening, I remember fumbling with my keys, balancing a plastic grocery bag on one arm. The fluorescent lights above the stairwell flickered lazily, buzzing like a dying insect. It was such a small detail, but that flickering on, off, felt like the heartbeat of the night, keeping time for something I could not see. I finally got the door open, dropped the bag on the counter, and let out the sigh of someone who thought the day had ended. But the truth was, the night had only begun. The first sign. I had just started putting groceries away when I felt it. Something subtle, yet heavy. The air in the room seemed thicker, as though the temperature had dropped several degrees in a matter of seconds. My first instinct was logical. Maybe the heater had cut off. But then I realized what unsettled me wasn't the cold, but the silence. Outside, the usual noise of traffic had died down. No cars, no footsteps, not even the bark of the stray dog that always lingered in the lot. It was silence with weight, pressing against my eardrums, daring me to notice it. That's when I heard it. 3 knocks. Not loud, not desperate, just deliberate. They came from the other side of my apartment door. The fear that crawls. At first, I laughed nervously, telling myself it was probably a neighbor or someone drunk who had the wrong door. Still, I hesitated before checking the peephole, and when I did, my blood turned cold. No one was there. I pulled away, heart pounding, and tried to reason. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe the knocks came from upstairs or down the corridor hall. But before my brain could untangle the logic, it happened again. 3 soft knocks. And this time, it came from the window. I froze. My apartment was on the 2nd floor. The thing outside. Slowly, I turned my head toward the window by the small dining table. The blinds were down, but between the slats, I thought I saw movement. A shadow, tall, narrow, lingering, just out of reach. I didn't want to look, but my body betrayed me, pulling me closer to the blinds as if curiosity was stronger than fear. I lifted one slat with the tip of my finger. What I saw made my heart crash against my ribs. A face. Not human, not animal. Something caught in between. Its skin was pale, stretched thin over sharp bones, with eyes so wide they reflected the dim light like 2 mirrors. Its mouth wasn't smiling, but parted slightly, revealing jagged teeth that didn't belong in any human jaw. And though the window separated us, I swear it was looking straight into me, not at me. I dropped the blinds, stumbling backward, almost knocking over the chair. My entire body shook, a cold sweat running down my spine. The breaking point. Grabbed my phone with trembling hands and dialed 911. My voice cracked as I tried to explain what I saw, what I heard. The dispatcher told me to stay calm, to lock the doors, and that someone would be there soon. But even as she spoke, I heard the third round of knocks. Not on the door, not on the window. This time, they came from inside the apartment. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a wrong door or some prank by a neighbor. Something else had entered. Something that didn't belong to this world. And my night, my ordinary, quiet night, had just turned into a fight for survival. Some memories stay with you forever, not because they're cherished, but because they scar. I was 17 at the time, a restless teenager in a small Midwestern town where nothing ever seemed to happen. Friday nights were always the same. Fast, food runs, loitering at the gas station, and driving around aimlessly until someone's curfew dragged them home. That night, however, the boredom pushed us further. My best friend Kyle had just gotten his license, and his dad's old Ford pickup truck became our ticket to freedom. The plan was simple. Drive out past the edge of town, find the abandoned railroad tracks people whispered about, and dare each other to walk them after midnight. It sounded stupid, and maybe it was, but when you're young and hungry for something that feels alive, stupidity feels like adventure. The road to nowhere. We left around 11:30 p.m., the truck's headlights slicing through the endless fields of corn and soybeans. Out there, the world felt empty, like the earth had forgotten to populate it with anything but crops and silence. The further we drove, the more the night swallowed us, the only sound being the hum of the engine and the occasional laugh we forced to break the tension. Eventually, the cracked asphalt gave way to gravel, then dirt. The truck jolted and swayed, every bump in the road rattling our nerves. Finally, we saw it, the faint outline of the rusted railroad bridge looming over a patch of trees. It was skeletal, broken, more bones than structure, and the rails were long gone. "This is it," Kyle said with forced bravado, pulling the truck to a stop. "Midnight walk, remember?" I laughed, though my throat was dry. The place looked haunted, even without the stories we'd been told. Stories about a man who had been struck by a train decades ago, his ghost doomed to wander the tracks, looking for his missing head. Crossing the bridge, we grabbed flashlights and stepped out. The cold air was sharp, cutting through my hoodie like knives. The crunch of gravel beneath our shoes felt too loud, like we were disturbing something that didn't want to be disturbed. The bridge stretched over a shallow creek, its wooden planks warped and missing in places. Every step groaned under our weight. Our beams of light cut across graffiti-covered beams. The letters faded and distorted like warnings written in another language. Halfway across, the world seemed too still. No wind, no crickets, no water moving below. Just silence. That's when we heard it. A faint whistle. Not the kind from a person, but the long, mournful note of a train. We froze. There hadn't been trains on these tracks for over 30 years. The presence. At first, I thought it was my imagination, a trick of nerves and suggestion. But Kyle heard it too. I could see it in his wide eyes reflecting the flashlight beam. The whistle came again, louder, closer. And then, beneath our feet, the wooden planks began to vibrate. "Kyle," I whispered, "this isn't funny." He shook his head violently. "I'm not doing anything." The vibration grew stronger, the boards shuddering as if 1,000 tons of steel were rushing across them. Yet, when we shone our flashlights down the length of the bridge, there was nothing. No train, no light, no movement. Just empty rails that didn't even exist anymore. Then came the footsteps. Slow, heavy, dragging. From the far end of the bridge, a figure emerged. Dark, hunched, its outline misshapen. The figure on the track sat first. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was another kid, or some drifter who made this place his home. But as it drew closer, the flashlight revealed details that broke logic in half. The man, or what was left of one, moved with an unnatural rhythm, like his joints bent the wrong way. His clothes were tattered, soaked in something dark. His head— my stomach turned. His head hung unnaturally low, as if it wasn't attached properly, dangling like a grotesque ornament. Yet somehow, it still faced us. Kyle dropped his flashlight. The beam spun wildly across the bridge, landing on the figure's face. And that was when I realized he didn't have one. Where his face should have been was a blur, a smear of shadow and pale flesh that didn't belong to the living. The breaking point? Panic ripped through me. "Run!" I shouted, but my voice cracked like glass. We turned and bolted back toward the truck, the bridge shaking beneath us, as though the figure's presence made the world weaker. Behind us, I could hear the footsteps quicken, dragging faster, heavier, closing the distance. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but fear made me faster than I'd ever been. We tumbled into the truck, slamming the doors, fumbling with the keys. Kyle's hands shook so badly he dropped them twice before jamming the ignition. The headlights flickered to life, and in that split second, we saw it again. Standing, just at the edge of the bridge, still head bent, still faceless, watching. And then it vanished. That was the night I stopped laughing at ghost stories. Because some stories don't need your belief to exist. They're already waiting, out there in the dark, to remind you that the dead never really leave. Some places feel wrong the moment you step inside them, not because of what you see, but because of what you feel. An invisible weight, a whisper that says, "You don't belong here." I was 22, working part-time at a small moving company. The job was simple: load furniture, haul boxes, get paid. But one job in particular would change how I looked at houses forever. We were hired to clear out an old 2-story home at the edge of town. The family had moved years ago, and the property had sat abandoned ever since. Rumors floated around about why. Some said the husband went insane. Others claimed the house was cursed. To me, it was just another job. But I was wrong. The empty house. We arrived around noon, sunlight spilling across the cracked driveway. The house loomed above us, paint peeling, shutters hanging by rusted hinges, and windows clouded like blind eyes. Even in daylight, it carried an aura of neglect, as though the structure itself wanted to be left alone. Inside, the air was suffocating. Dust motes swirled in every beam of light, and the smell of damp wood and mildew clung to our clothes. The first floor was packed with relics of a life once lived, furniture draped in white sheets, photo frames still nailed to the walls, a child's tricycle leaning against the staircase. I remember pausing at that tricycle. The front wheel was bent, the handlebar rusted, but it looked placed, not abandoned, as if someone had set it there recently. My coworker, Dan, nudged me. "Come on, man, let's get this over with." The upstairs. We divided the work. Dan tackled the kitchen while I headed upstairs. Each step creaked under my weight, groaning like the house disapproved. The hallway stretched long and narrow, lined with doors. Some stood open, revealing bare rooms, while others were firmly shut. The first door I opened led to a bedroom frozen in time. The wallpaper was peeling, patterned with faded flowers. A bed sat in the center, its mattress caved in like a body had been resting there for years. On the dresser lay a jewelry box, lid cracked open, its contents scattered. Cheap rings, tangled, chains, and a single, small locket. I picked it up. Inside was a photo of a little girl, maybe 6 years old, her smile wide and innocent. Something about her eyes unsettled me, not because they were frightening, but because they seemed alive, as if she were still looking at me from the past. I set the locket down quickly. That was when I heard it. A giggle. High-pitched, childlike. It echoed faintly down the hallway. The giggle. My stomach twisted. I told myself it was Dan, maybe playing a prank, but I knew his voice. This wasn't him. I stepped back into the hallway, flashlight cutting, through the gloom. At the far end, one of the closed doors creaked open just an inch, then stopped. The giggle came again. "Dan?" I called out, forcing my voice steady. No answer. I tightened my grip on the flashlight and walked toward the door. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but my legs carried me forward anyway. I nudged the door open with my foot. Inside was a child's bedroom. The wallpaper here was brighter, patterned with cartoon animals, though time had faded them into grotesque shapes. A small bed sat in the corner, blankets rumpled, as if someone had just climbed out. Toys littered the floor, blocks, dolls, a stuffed bear missing one eye. And there, on the wall above the bed, drawn in crayon, was a message. "I still live here." The shadow in the room. My chest tightened. The room felt colder than the rest of the house, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones. I turned to leave, but something in the corner caught my eye. At first, it looked like another toy, a doll propped against the wall. But as my light hit it, I realized it wasn't a toy at all. It was a shadow, shaped like a child, small and crouched. But shadows don't have eyes. This one did. Two faintly glowing points of light, staring back at me from the darkness. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the scattered toys. The shadow didn't move. It just watched. The giggle came again, but this time it wasn't from across the hall. It came from the corner, from the shadow. The breaking point. I bolted, crashing down the hallway, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Dan shouted something from the kitchen, but I didn't stop. I burst out the front door into the daylight, lungs heaving, heart threatening to tear out of my chest. Dan followed seconds later, eyes wide. What the hell happened? I couldn't speak. I just pointed back at the house. For a long moment, we stood there in silence. Then, from one of the upstairs windows, we both heard it, clear as day. A child's giggle. That was the last moving job I ever took in an abandoned house. Because some homes don't just keep memories. Some homes keep their children too. Some jobs bring money. Some bring danger. And some leave behind scars that no paycheck could ever heal. I learned this the night I took a security shift I should have never accepted. The job offer. It was late October, and work was scarce. Bills stacked on the counter of my tiny apartment, red letters screaming, "Final notice." Desperation makes you say yes before you even think. So when my phone buzzed with an offer, overnight security for an abandoned industrial site on the outskirts of town, I didn't hesitate. Easy money, the voice on the other end promised. Just keep an eye out. Make sure no one sneaks in. 8 hours, $400. Cash. $400 for one night? That was more than I made in a week. I said yes. The factory. The factory sat like a carcass in the EV, middle of nowhere, rusted metal siding, broken windows gaping like missing teeth, and a single chain-link fence that looked more symbolic than protective. The company had shut down years ago, after a fire gutted part of the plant. No one had worked there since. The guard station was a flimsy trailer parked near the front gate. Inside, a folding chair, a desk, and a black-and-white monitor, hooked to a few grainy security cameras. The man who handed me the keys barely looked me in the eye. Stay inside if you can. If you have to patrol, don't go near the north wing. I frowned. Why? Because it's not safe, he muttered, then left without another word. The first hours. The night dragged slow at first. The cameras flickered, showing endless loops of empty hallways and broken machinery. Wind howled through, shattered windows, making the whole place groan like it still remembered the fire that killed it. I tried to distract myself with my phone, but the signal was weak. Every few minutes, I glanced at the screens. Nothing. Just shadows. But around 2 a.m., one of the monitors twitched. Camera 4. The north wing. At first, I thought it was a glitch. The image blurred, then sharpened. A hallway lined with collapsed pipes and debris. And in the center of the frame, movement. A figure. The figure. I leaned forward, squinting at the screen. It looked like a man, but wrong. Too tall. Limbs oddly jointed, like his arms bent in ways they shouldn't. He moved slow, dragging one leg, head twitching at angles that made my stomach turn. I blinked, and the screen went black. I flipped the controls, trying to reset the feed. When the picture returned, the hallway was empty. I told myself I imagined it. Fatigue, shadows, static. It had to be. But deep down, I knew better. The patrol, by 3 a.m., the trailer felt suffocating. The ITI walls seemed to press inward, the air thick and stale. Against every instinct screaming inside me, I grabbed the flashlight and stepped out. The factory loomed like a graveyard of steel. My boots echoed across cracked concrete, every sound magnified by the silence. I kept telling myself, one quick patrol, then back inside. I avoided the north wing, at least at first, but curiosity is a dangerous thing. When I reached the rusted double doors marked north, I froze. The air here was colder, sharper, like the night itself avoided this place. I should have turned back, but I didn't. Inside the north wing. The hallway stretched ahead, littered with burned beams and collapsed ceiling tiles. My flashlight beam trembled over graffiti-smeared walls and twisted pipes. Then I heard it. A scraping sound, metal against concrete. Slow, dragging. I killed the light instinctively, holding my breath. The sound grew closer. From the shadows, something stepped into view. The thing in the dark. It wasn't a man. At least, not anymore. Its skin was stretched thin over bones, gray and cracked like ash. The head lolled unnaturally, as though the neck had broken long ago. Its arms were too long, hands ending in claw-like fingers that scraped the floor as it walked. And its face, God help me, was a melted blur of features, like flesh had been half burned, and never healed. It stopped, sniffed the air, turned its ruined face toward me. I ran. The escape. I don't remember how I made it back to the trailer. My lungs burned, legs pumping like a machine I couldn't shut off. Behind me, I heard it. Those claws scraping, that broken neck snapping as it moved. I slammed the door, locked it, pressed my back against the wall. For minutes, nothing, just silence. Then, tap, tap, tap. On the trailer window. I turned and saw its face pressed against the glass. That was the night I quit security work for good. Because some jobs don't pay in money. They pay in nightmares that never leave you. The glass rattled under its weight. That ruined face smeared against the pane, skin cracked and blistered as though it had been burned decades ago and left to rot. Its hollow eyes, if they could even be called eyes, seemed to know me, to search for something inside me. I wanted to scream, but fear welded my throat shut. All I could do was stand frozen while its claws scraped lines into the glass, deliberate, patient, like it was testing the barrier between us. Then, without warning, it vanished. The window stood empty. The silence. Silence can be louder than any sound. I stood there trembling, the flashlight clutched like a useless weapon in my hand. Seconds stretched into minutes. The night outside was too still, too calm, as if the world itself held its breath. I forced myself to move, to sit back down in the folding chair, eyes glued to the monitors. One by one, the cameras flickered, showing empty corridors, broken machines, collapsing walls. Then, camera 4 lit up again. The North Wing hallway. And there it was, standing perfectly still in the middle of the frame. But this time, it wasn't moving. It was staring straight into the camera, as if it knew I was watching. The call my shaking hands fumbled for the radio clipped to the desk. I tried to contact the man who had hired me. Static. Just endless static. I pulled out my phone, praying for a single bar of signal. Nothing. When I looked back up, the monitor showed something that turned my blood to ice. The creature wasn't in the North Wing anymore. It was in the guard trailer hallway. On the screen, the grainy image showed the inside of the very trailer I sat in, showed the door creaking open, inch by inch. I spun around. The door was closed. The wrong camera. I realized with horror that the trailer had no interior cameras. None. Which meant the thing was inside the system, feeding me images that weren't real, or, worse, that it was showing me what would happen. The screen flickered again. Now it showed me. Me, sitting in the chair, staring into the monitor. And behind me, a figure standing in the shadows, just inches away. I whipped around so fast the chair toppled. The trailer was empty. But the screen still showed it standing there, right over my shoulder. The whisper. Then came the sound. Not a growl, not a scream. A whisper. It seeped from the walls, from the air itself. Words I couldn't understand, spoken in a broken, rasping voice. My ears bled with the effort of trying to comprehend. I clamped my hands over my head, but it made no difference. The whispering was inside me, burrowing into my skull. "Why are you here?" it hissed. "This is not your place." The flashlight slipped from my grasp and rolled across the floor. its beam slicing through the darkness. And that's when I saw it. A shadow. Not cast by me, but by something else. It stretched long across the floor, even though there was nothing there to make it. The warning. I don't know where the courage came from, maybe just the need to survive, but I shouted into the darkness. "What are you?" The whispering stopped. For a heartbeat, the silence pressed harder than the noise had. Then it answered, not in words, but in feeling. A flood of images surged into my mind. Flames, screams, workers burning alive inside the factory walls, people pounding on locked doors as smoke swallowed them whole. I gasped, clutching my chest, as though I could feel their fire searing me. The creature wasn't just haunting this place. It was this place. A remnant of all that death, all that agony, fused into a form that never left. The return, the monitors went black all at once. Then, one by one, they lit back up. But instead of the factory, they all showed the same thing. Chavutihiu trailer, my trailer, and me, on the screen, staring in terror. In each camera feed, I saw myself surrounded by shadow figures, dozens of them, burned faces, twisted bodies, eyeless sockets staring. I spun in every direction, flashlight beam trembling. Nothing. The room was empty. But on the screens, they were all moving closer, closer, closer. Until the last thing I saw before the power died completely was a dozen charred hands reaching for me. That was when I realized this wasn't a job. It was a trap, and the factory didn't want me gone. It wanted me to stay, forever.